The morning light poured through the lace curtains, soft and golden, touching every corner of my dining room. The air smelled faintly of roasted coffee beans and old pine floors. I poured my usual cup into the white porcelain mug that had belonged to my late wife, Margaret. It had tiny blue hydrangeas painted on the rim, slightly faded from years of use, but I couldn't start my day without it. My name is Edward Langford, 68 years old, retired architect, and lifelong resident of Lenox, Massachusetts. I live in a 2-story colonial house I designed myself back in the late 70s. Every detail, the oak banister, the skylight above the landing, even the window seat in the den carried the weight of memories. For years, this house had been filled with laughter, dinner parties, and Margaret's classical piano music floating down the hall. After she passed away, silence took her place. For a while, that silence was unbearable. But then, my children came home. Mark, my oldest, is 42, a civil engineer who once designed bridges in Boston. He moved back last year after his company merged and relocated to the Berkshires. "Just until things settled down, Dad," he had said. Sarah, my younger one, is 37 and works as a pharmaceutical researcher. Her husband left her 6 months ago, and she came home with boxes of books and a heartbreak she didn't talk about. I told myself it was comforting to have the house full again, to hear footsteps upstairs and the faint hum of conversation through the walls. But lately, something about that noise had changed. It wasn't comforting anymore. Mark rarely joined me for breakfast. He left before dawn, returning after dark, always with some vague excuse about projects running late. When he did speak, it was short, clipped answers. He looked older somehow, worn down. Sarah, on the other hand, slept most of the day and spent her nights in the basement, claiming she was organizing old family things. I hadn't seen her smile properly in weeks. Still, I clung to the thought that they were healing in their own ways. That's what a parent tells himself: everything will make sense eventually. That morning began like any other. Coffee, the newspaper, Max the old golden retriever sleeping by my feet. The radio hummed softly in the background, with a local weather forecast. Cool air moving through western Massachusetts today, chance of light rain by evening. I looked around the kitchen, thinking how peaceful everything seemed, when a faint drip interrupted the stillness. At first, I thought it was the sink, but the sound didn't come from there, it came from above. Drip, drip, drip. I stepped into the dining room and froze. A small, dark stain had formed in the middle of the ceiling, right above the table. A droplet of water trembled at the edge, then fell, landing with a soft plink into my half-empty coffee cup. That ceiling was directly below the upstairs bathroom, the one Mark had completely renovated last year. He had insisted on doing all the coordination himself, hiring workers he trusted. He was proud of it. New pipes, new tiles, new fixtures. He said I wouldn't need to worry about plumbing again for the next 20 years. Apparently, 20 years had become 12 months. I sighed, grabbed a towel to wipe the table, and called upstairs. "Mark, you up there? There's a leak." No answer. He must have already left for work. I hesitated before calling him on the phone. He picked up after several rings, his voice strained. "Dad, can this wait? I'm in the middle of something. It's leaking again under the bathroom you redid. Maybe we should call the same company back. The warranty should still be." No, don't call them," he interrupted quickly. "Just get someone else. I'll text you a plumber's number. A guy I know. He's good." I frowned. Why not the same company? They'd fix it for free. He paused for a moment before answering, voice tighter than before. "Because I don't trust them, that's all. I'll send you the number." Then he hung up. His reaction unsettled me. Mark was usually calm, methodical, but he had sounded almost nervous. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe he'd had a bad experience with that contractor. 10 minutes later, a text appeared. "Caleb Donahue, plumber, Pittsfield. Very reliable." I dialed the number. A steady voice answered. "Good morning, this is Caleb. Mr. Donahue, my ceiling's leaking from the bathroom upstairs. Could you take a look?" "Of course, sir. I can be there in about an hour. What's your address?" I gave him the directions, thanked him, and hung up. Relief washed over me. It was probably nothing serious, a loose pipe, a cracked fitting. Problems had solutions. As I waited, I went through my usual chores, watering the plants by the window, feeding Max, wiping the counters. But something about the quiet in the house that morning felt heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves were listening. From upstairs came a faint creak. The sound of a door closing. Sarah must have finally woken up. I almost called out to her but stopped. She'd just tell me she was tired, that she needed space. Instead, I stood at the window, staring out at the golden leaves drifting across the front yard. The trees along the road had already started to turn, a reminder that another Massachusetts autumn was coming, a season Margaret used to love. I smiled faintly, thinking of her. She always said, "Our house had a soul." Back then, I didn't realize how true that might become. Exactly 1 hour later, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, a man in his early 50s stood there, in a dark blue jumpsuit, toolbox in hand. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the sort of calm expression you trust instantly. "Mr. Langford?" he asked. "I'm Caleb Donahue, the plumber." "Yes, come in, please," I said, stepping aside. "The leak's right over the dining room." Caleb looked up, examined the stain, then nodded. "I'll need to check the upstairs bathroom first," he said, his tone polite but focused. "After that, I'll go down to the basement to inspect the main line. Sometimes a leak upstairs shows itself somewhere else entirely." "Of course," I said, relieved to have someone competent handling it. He smiled briefly, then climbed the stairs with the quiet assurance of a man who had fixed 1,000 problems just like this. I poured another cup of coffee and sat down at the table, watching the slow, rhythmic drip on the ceiling. It almost hypnotized me. Back then, I thought it was just water. I had no idea that small drip was the first sign that my life and everything I believed about my children was about to collapse. Caleb moved quietly through the upstairs hallway, his footsteps muffled against the old wooden floorboards. From the kitchen below, I could hear the faint clinking of tools and the occasional low hum of him talking to himself as he worked. There was something reassuring about the sound, steady, methodical, professional. I busied myself, wiping the counter, trying not to worry. After all, a simple leak shouldn't take long to fix. Still, the house felt unusually silent. Even Max had wandered off to his bed in the den, ears perked as if sensing something strange. About 20 minutes later, I heard Caleb coming down the stairs. His footsteps were slow, deliberate. When he entered the kitchen, I noticed right away that his calm demeanor had changed. His face looked pale. He wiped his hands on a rag and avoided my eyes. "Did you find the problem?" I asked. "Was it the upstairs pipe?" He hesitated. "Not exactly, sir. The plumbing looks newer than I expected. Very clean work. No cracks, no leaks in the visible joints." "That's good news, isn't it?" I tried to sound lighthearted. "Yes, but something doesn't add up." He adjusted his glasses, then pointed toward the basement door. "If you don't mind, I'd like to take a look at your main supply line. I need to make sure the water pressure isn't building up somewhere it shouldn't." "Of course," I said. "The basement door's right through there. Do you want me to come with you?" He shook his head. "Better if I go alone. Less chance of someone stepping on loose boards. It'll only take a few minutes." "All right," I said, though a faint unease tugged at me. "I'll be here if you need anything." He nodded once, then disappeared through the basement door. The creak of the old wooden stairs faded into silence, followed by the distant echo of metal against metal. I tried to distract myself by sorting through the mail, but my hands kept trembling. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a burst valve or faulty seal. Still, every few minutes, I caught myself glancing at the clock. After half an hour, I started to worry. What could take so long? Finally, I heard the basement door open again. Caleb stepped out slowly, closing it behind him. His face was ghostly white. He didn't say a word at first, just set his toolbox down carefully on the kitchen floor. "Mr. Langford," he said after a long pause, his voice low and strained, "I think we need to sit down for a moment." Something in his tone made the hair on my arms stand on end. "Is it bad?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He pulled out a chair and motioned for me to sit, Please, he said softly. What I found down there isn't typical. And before I say anything else, I need to ask, does anyone else have regular access to your basement? I frowned. My son and daughter. They live here. Why? He took a deep breath. Because what I found isn't part of any standard plumbing system. Someone installed something unusual behind your furnace, hidden among the pipes. At first, I thought it was some kind of filtration unit, but it isn't. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean, it isn't? He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if afraid the walls might be listening. It's a dispersal system. A setup designed to release something, some kind of vapor or gas, through your ventilation. I stared at him, trying to make sense of the words. A dispersal system? For what? I don't know exactly, sir. I'm a plumber, not a chemist. But there are small canisters attached, 3 of them, with different colored fluids. There's also a digital timer wired into the air duct that leads directly upstairs. I blinked, stunned. Upstairs? You mean your bedroom? He finished quietly. For a moment, the kitchen seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. That's impossible. There must be some mistake. He shook his head firmly. I've been in this trade for 20 years. I know what normal looks like. Someone built this deliberately. Whoever did it knew exactly how your ventilation runs through the house. The system is designed to disperse small doses over time. My mind scrambled for explanations. Could it be a new kind of air purifier? Mark installed all kinds of equipment when he renovated the bathroom last year. No purifier I've ever seen uses multi-chamber canisters with chemical lines feeding into heating ducts, he said grimly. And no purifier needs a timer programmed in hours and dosage cycles. Dosage cycles? I repeated numbly. Caleb nodded. Sir, I think someone is trying to expose you to something harmful over a long period of time. My chest tightened. I wanted to laugh, to tell him he was crazy, but the look in his eyes stopped me. He wasn't lying. He wasn't confused. He looked frightened. I tried to speak, but my voice barely came out. You think someone installed it to hurt me? I think it's a possibility we can't ignore, he said gently. You mentioned your children live here. Do they ever go into the basement? They do, sometimes, I whispered. Sarah stores things down there. Mark checks the boiler now and then. He pressed his lips together, hesitant. Mr. Langford, the person who built this, had full access to your home for days, weeks even. This wasn't a quick job. It was planned, assembled, and hidden carefully. Whoever did this knew you'd never go down there. A slow dread began to crawl up my spine. That bathroom renovation, I murmured. Mark insisted I let him supervise everything. He said I should relax and let him handle the contractors. Caleb's expression grew even more somber. That would have been the perfect opportunity. Workers in and out, new piping, new ventilation routes, no one would have questioned a few extra tubes. I leaned back, dizzy. The room spun. But why? Why would my own son or daughter? Caleb reached out, steadying my trembling hand. Sir, I don't know the answer to that yet. But I do know this: what's installed down there isn't safe. If it's active, every breath you take in that bedroom could be poisoning you slowly. My pulse roared in my ears. For a second, all I could hear was the ticking of the wall clock. Caleb stood. I need you to do exactly what I say. Don't confront anyone. Don't call them. Just pack a few things, documents, medication, essentials, and get out of this house right now. Get out? I repeated, still dazed. Yes, Mr. Langford, he said, his voice firm now. I've seen enough to know this isn't an accident. Someone in this house wants you gone. The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. I felt my world tilt again, but this time I didn't fight it. I understood. I stood up slowly, looking toward the stairs where Sarah's door was closed, silent. The light under it glowed faintly. It was the same house I had built with my own hands, the same walls I had raised around my family for safety and love, and now they had become a trap. Caleb led the way toward the basement, his flashlight cutting a thin white beam through the dim hallway. I followed a few steps behind, my heart hammering so loudly I could almost hear it echoing off the walls. Every creak of the stairs sounded amplified, every breath too loud in the stillness of the house. I had walked down those same steps hundreds of times before to fix a fuse, to grab Christmas decorations, to store old sketches from my architectural days. But that morning, the air felt different. Thick, cold, heavy. When we reached the bottom, Caleb moved the flashlight slowly across the concrete floor. The basement looked as ordinary as ever. Boxes stacked neatly against the far wall, my old drafting table in the corner, the faint smell of damp concrete and oil from the furnace, everything in its place. "Over here," Caleb said quietly. He stopped beside the furnace, crouching to shine his light behind it. "Be careful," he whispered. "The back area is tight." I knelt down, the cold concrete pressing against my knees. For a moment, I didn't see anything unusual, just the usual maze of copper pipes and silver ducts. But when Caleb adjusted the flashlight, the beam landed on something that didn't belong. Between the ventilation pipes, half hidden behind the main duct, sat a metal box the size of a toaster oven. 3 thin tubes of transparent plastic snaked out of it, one blue, one yellow, one colorless, and disappeared into the duct leading upstairs. The box itself had a small digital timer glowing faintly red, counting down from numbers I didn't understand. "What in God's name is that?" I whispered. Caleb didn't answer immediately. He leaned in closer, his expression darkening. "You see those canisters inside the casing? Each one contains a different liquid. The tubes feed directly into your air system. That timer controls when and how much is released." I felt my throat tighten. "Released into the air I breathe?" He nodded. "Exactly." I reached out with trembling fingers and touched one of the tubes. It was warm. Not from the furnace, this heat was different. Alive, like something running through it. I snatched my hand back instinctively. "How long do you think this has been here?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Caleb crouched lower, examining the tubing. Judging by the residue and the wear on the valves, I'd say at least 8 or 9 months, maybe longer. 8 or 9 months. That was when it began, the headaches, the fatigue, the dizzy spells I had blamed on age. I thought it was normal. I even joked to Sarah once that I was getting old and forgetful. She had smiled faintly and said, "Maybe you should rest more, Dad. You're overworking yourself." Overworking myself. That memory stabbed through me now like a blade. I stared at the device, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes saw. But this kind of thing, it requires knowledge, planning, equipment. Caleb nodded grimly. "It does. Whoever did this wasn't guessing. They knew about ventilation layouts, dosage timing, airflow rates. This is precise, professional." I swallowed hard. My son's an engineer. He'd know how to connect this to the duct system. "And your daughter?" Caleb asked gently. "She's a chemist," I whispered. Silence. Only the faint hum of the furnace filled the space between us. The truth arrived slowly, like ice spreading across glass. At first, you want to deny it, but denial cracks under the weight of evidence. "No," I said aloud, shaking my head. "No, they wouldn't. They're my children. They took care of me after Margaret died. They wouldn't." Caleb's voice was quiet but firm. "Mr. Langford, I wish I could believe that. But I've seen this kind of thing before. People doing unthinkable things for money, inheritance, or control." "Money." I blinked, confused. Then I remembered. Margaret's life insurance policy. The savings account. The house itself now worth close to $1 million after the property boom. I had told Mark and Sarah that everything would be split evenly when I was gone. Maybe, in their minds, gone just came sooner. I felt dizzy again. The smell of dust and metal closed around me. Caleb placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Sir, we need to leave. Right now. Don't pack much, just what you need for a few days. Once you're safe, we'll call the police." I looked toward the stairs. "They're upstairs," I murmured. "Sarah's probably still in her room. If she hears us leaving—" "I'll handle it," Caleb said firmly. "Just act normal. Tell her I found the problem, and I'll come back later to finish. Then go pack quietly." I hesitated. What if she asks questions? "Keep it simple. The less you say, the safer you are. I nodded numbly. My body felt like it was moving through water as I followed him up the stairs. The familiar creak of the floorboards sounded different now, sinister somehow. As we reached the kitchen, I paused, glancing at the staircase to the second floor. Sarah's door was still closed, a sliver of light under it. Caleb turned to me. Mr. Langford, listen to me carefully. I've seen things like this go bad fast. Once they realize you've found out, they could panic. And panicked people are dangerous. I looked at him, my mind spinning. You really think they'd hurt me? He met my eyes without flinching. Sir, they already have. The words hit me harder than any physical blow could. I staggered slightly, gripping the edge of the counter. All at once, flashes of recent months came back, the strange taste in the air of my bedroom, the way my clothes sometimes smelled faintly chemical, the humid heaviness that never quite went away. Mark telling me not to open the attic vents because it messes with air pressure. Sarah offering me tea every night, insisting it would help me sleep. My entire world, my sense of safety, cracked open like a rotten beam under too much weight. I can't believe this, I said softly. They're my children. Caleb's voice softened. I know, but right now, you can't think like a father. You have to think like a man, fighting for his life. I looked down at my trembling hands. Fighting for my life, I repeated numbly. When Caleb left to gather his tools, I stood alone in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at the basement door. Behind it, beneath my own house, was a machine designed to end me, built by the people I had loved most. I climbed the stairs to my room, my mind running on instinct. Pack clothes, take the documents, get out. But before leaving, I turned toward the family portrait hanging by the staircase. It was taken last Christmas, Mark, Sarah, and me standing by the tree, smiling like any normal family. Now, I saw something else behind those smiles. Calculation, patience, cold intent. The picture frame slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. I didn't pick it up. That sound, the glass breaking, felt like the final moment of the life I used to have. I moved through the house as quietly as possible, every creak of the floorboard making my pulse jump. Upstairs, Sarah's door stayed closed, but I could hear faint movement, drawers opening, the soft thud of something heavy being set down. She was awake. Caleb whispered from the kitchen, "Pack only the essentials, Mr. Langford, and hurry." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. In my bedroom, I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and began stuffing it with the first things my hands found: shirts, trousers, my shaving kit, and a pair of comfortable shoes. I reached for the small safe under the bed. The combination lock felt colder than usual beneath my fingertips. Inside were my passport, Margaret's death certificate, the deed to the house, and my savings documents. I added them all to the bag. Then I hesitated. My eyes landed on the nightstand, the place where Margaret's photo stood in a small silver frame. Her smile in that picture was bright and full of faith. She used to tell me, "Love makes a house unbreakable." I picked up the photo and tucked it between my clothes. Love hadn't made my house unbreakable. It had made me blind. From below came the faint murmur of Caleb's voice. He was talking to Sarah, keeping her distracted. My pulse quickened. I zipped up the bag and took one last look around the room I'd once called my refuge. The air smelled faintly, chemical again, sharp and metallic, like disinfectant mixed with burnt wires. I realized I had been inhaling that same faint scent for months. No wonder I'd been dizzy, foggy, tired. I had been breathing my own slow execution. I walked down the stairs as quietly as I could, each step feeling like a countdown. In the kitchen, Caleb stood near the sink, toolbox in hand, speaking casually to Sarah. She was in her robe, her hair messy from sleep, sipping coffee. She looked like the same daughter who had cried on my shoulder during her divorce, but I couldn't see her that way anymore. "So, it was just old pipes?" she asked Caleb. "Exactly," he said, his tone steady. "I patched the weak joint. Shouldn't be any more leaks." "Oh, good," she said, giving me a polite smile. "Dad gets so anxious about these things." Her eyes shifted toward my duffel bag. "Are you going somewhere?" I froze. Just running errands, I said quickly. Bank, pharmacy, a few things to handle. I can come with you, she offered. You shouldn't drive alone when you've been feeling tired lately. My stomach twisted. That same gentle concern she'd used so many times now sounded sinister. That's all right, I said, forcing a smile. You rest. I'll be back soon. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. For a second, I thought she could see right through the lie. Then she shrugged. Okay, but don't forget your phone. Mark will want to reach you later. I nodded, pretending to check my pocket. My phone was already switched off and buried deep in the bag. Caleb gave me a subtle look, a warning. Time to go. How much do I owe you? I asked him. $60, he said without missing a beat. I handed him the cash. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and in that silent exchange, we both understood the unspoken message. It's time. Thank you, I said aloud. Though the words carried a weight Sarah couldn't possibly understand. My pleasure, Caleb replied. We stepped out into the crisp morning air. The sky had turned pale gray, clouds rolling in from the west. Autumn leaves swirled across the driveway as a chill wind picked up. Once we reached his truck, Caleb opened the passenger door for me. Get in, he said quietly. As we drove away, I looked back at the house through the side mirror. The windows reflected the pale sky, blank and silent. From the outside, it looked so normal, an old New England home tucked neatly between maple trees. But I knew now that behind those cream-colored walls, death had been living with me. We drove in silence for several minutes, the tires humming against the pavement. Finally, I managed to whisper. She looked so calm, so normal. How can someone act like nothing's wrong after doing something like that? Caleb glanced at me briefly, then back at the road. People can wear masks for years, sir, especially when they think they're about to get what they want. What they want, I murmured. Money. He nodded. Or freedom from their problems. Sometimes it's not even greed, it's desperation disguised as logic. I turned toward the window, watching the hills of western Massachusetts blur past. My children were raised better than that. I don't doubt that, Caleb said softly. But I've learned that when people are drowning, they'll grab onto anything to stay afloat, even if it means pulling someone else under. We reached a small roadside motel on the edge of Pittsfield. Its faded sign read, "The Laurel Inn," in peeling paint. Caleb parked in a corner space away from the road. I'll get you a room under my name, he said. It's safer that way. Don't answer the phone, don't open the door for anyone but me. Inside the motel office, the clerk barely looked up from her crossword as Caleb signed the register. He handed me the key to room 5. Stay here, he said. I'll head back to your house this afternoon. Tell them I need to double-check the pipes. I'll get photos of that thing and samples from the canisters. Then we go to the police. I nodded, though my mind was a storm of fear and disbelief. What if they notice I'm gone too long? Then we move faster, he said simply. When I stepped into the small motel room, the silence pressed in around me. A single window looked out over the empty parking lot. The bedspread smelled faintly of detergent. On the nightstand sat a lamp and a Bible. I sank into the chair by the window, my hands shaking. My whole life had changed in a matter of hours. One morning I was drinking coffee under a dripping ceiling. By noon, I was a fugitive from my own children. Caleb lingered in the doorway. You're safe for now, he said quietly. Try to rest. I'll be back by evening. When the door closed, I sat in the dim room and looked at my reflection in the mirror across from me. My face looked older than I remembered, tired, pale, and lined with disbelief. Then I realized something chilling. For months, I'd been slowly dying in that house, and I hadn't even noticed. That thought broke something inside me. I buried my face in my hands and wept not just for myself, but for the family I had lost long before I ever knew it. Outside, the rain began to fall softly against the window, the same rhythm as the drip that had started it all. Rain streaked the motel window like thin lines of watercolor, tracing the gray world outside. I hadn't slept at all. Every creak from the hallway, every sound of a car passing by, made my body tense. I kept imagining Sarah knocking on the door, Mark's voice calling my name through the rain. By noon, Caleb returned. His jacket was soaked, his face pale and grim. He carried a small messenger bag over his shoulder. The moment he stepped inside, he locked the door and checked the corners of the room, making sure we were alone. "What did you find?" I asked. My voice sounded hoarse, smaller than I remembered it. Caleb set the bag down on the table and unzipped it. Inside were neatly arranged papers, a digital camera, and a clear zip bag containing something that looked like thin plastic tube. "I went back to your house pretending I needed to double-check the pressure valves," he said quietly. "Your daughter let me in. She even made me coffee." I swallowed hard. "And?" She seemed relaxed, but I could tell she was watching me. "Your son wasn't home yet, so I went downstairs and took pictures." He turned the camera around, showing me the screen. The photos made my stomach twist. The same metal box, the same colored canisters, the same digital timer glowing red. Caleb had photographed every angle close-ups of wiring, the connections, even the residue on the tubing. "Did they notice?" I asked. "Not at first. But when I came back up, I heard voices in the kitchen. Your son had arrived." He paused, taking a deep breath. "They were arguing, loudly." "What did they say?" He hesitated before answering, as if repeating the words might make them real again. "Your son said, 'She's getting suspicious, Sarah. She asked too many questions yesterday.' And your daughter replied, 'Then we moved to Plan B. I'm not waiting another month.'" My breath caught. Plan B? From what I heard, Plan A was the slow poisoning. Plan B sounded like something quicker. He mentioned a fall. She mentioned fire. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. "Dear God." "They didn't know I was standing near the hallway," Caleb continued. "I managed to record part of it on my phone." He took out a small recorder and hit play. The voices came through muffled but clear enough. "She's too alert. We should have done it weeks ago. If we do it now, it'll look suspicious. Just let me handle it. You said that before, and now she's calling plumbers and asking questions about air vents. What happens when she calls the police?" "Then we clean everything tonight. You take the canisters, I'll wipe the notes." Caleb stopped the recording. That's when I left. "They're planning to remove the evidence." I felt dizzy, as if the ground beneath me had vanished. "We have to go to the police. Right now." "Yes," Caleb said. "But before we do, you need to understand why they're doing this. The police will ask. The clearer the motive, the faster they'll act." I nodded weakly. "I don't know what could drive them to this." He reached into his bag again and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "I found this in the basement, near one of the shelves. It's a notebook page, torn from something larger." The page was covered in neat handwriting, Sarah's. I recognized it instantly. She used to write me little notes when she was a child. Same looping letters, same careful curves. But this wasn't a child's note. Dates and symptoms were listed in 2 columns. January 12. Fatigue. Increased headaches. Adjust blue dose. February 4. Slight confusion. Slower reaction times. March 9. Nausea at breakfast. Reduce concentration to 30%. April 18. Good progress. Less resistant. Easier to manipulate. I felt sick. They were tracking me? Caleb nodded. She recorded your symptoms like a scientist tracking an experiment. And this, he unfolded another page, shows their calculations for dosage. It's chemical notation. Whatever she mixed was meant to mimic natural aging, slow cognitive decline, fatigue, respiratory failure. I stared at the handwriting that used to write birthday cards and shopping lists. She was supposed to heal people, I said softly. She was the one who used to scold me for skipping my medicine. Caleb looked at me, compassion in his eyes. Sometimes the smartest minds do the darkest things. She knew how to make it look natural. That's what makes it dangerous. He took out another document, printed bank records. I also found this on your son's desk. He must have left it open. He's in deep trouble, Mr. Langford. Gambling debts over $100,000. And some of it to private lenders, not banks. I rubbed my temples. And Sarah? She mentioned during their argument that her research grant was revoked after an ethics inquiry. Apparently, she falsified data in one of her reports. She's facing potential charges. No money, no job, no reputation. So they decided I was worth more dead than alive, I whispered. Caleb said nothing. He didn't have to. I walked to the window, looking out at the rain pooling in the parking lot. I raised them to be kind. I taught them to tell the truth, to work hard, to never take shortcuts. Margaret would be heartbroken. Caleb's voice softened. She'd be proud that you're still standing. I turned back to him. Do you have everything the police will need? Yes, he said, patting the camera and the documents. We have photos, recordings, chemical samples, and motive. It's enough for a warrant. Then, let's go. Caleb hesitated. We should wait until evening. If they realize you're gone for good, they might run or destroy what's left. The police will move faster once they're sure the evidence is still there. I looked at the clock. It was 3:40 p.m. The minutes felt like hours. Caleb started packing his things carefully. They're dangerous, but they're also careless when they think they're in control. They'll make mistakes. I nodded, gripping the back of the chair to steady myself. They already made one, I said quietly. They underestimated their father. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The rain turned heavier, beating against the window like a warning. Somewhere out there, my children were planning how to finish what they'd started. But this time, I wasn't helpless anymore. By the time evening fell, the rain had stopped, leaving the air thick and metallic, the kind of quiet that feels too deliberate. The world outside the motel window shimmered under streetlights, puddles reflecting amber halos. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the clock, 8:47 p.m. Caleb had gone to the police precinct in Pittsfield an hour ago, promising to return with an officer once they reviewed the evidence. He told me to keep the door locked, the curtains drawn, and the lights dimmed. But waiting was torture. Every sound outside the hum of tires, the low thud of doors closing made my skin tighten. My thoughts circled endlessly. They know. They must know I'm gone. What if they're already looking for me? I tried to calm myself, but fear has a way of multiplying in silence. At 9:15, headlights flashed across the motel lot. I froze. Caleb's van had a cracked left taillight, but the car that pulled in gleamed perfect red, its engine idling low and smooth. A moment later, my phone, one I'd switched off, but had foolishly reconnected to check the time, buzzed violently in my hand. Mark. The message read, Dad, we know where you are. Please, just talk to us. This has gone too far. I dropped the phone onto the bed, my heart pounding so loud I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Then came a soft knock on the door. Dad, a voice called. It was Sarah, calm, measured, the same tone she'd use when asking if I wanted tea. Please open the door. We just want to talk. I backed away, nearly tripping over my bag. My first instinct was to yell for help, but the motel seemed empty. I could see only the flickering neon sign through the blinds. Dad, she said again, her voice lower now. You shouldn't trust that plumber. He's lying to you. He's trying to take advantage of you. There was movement outside, a shadow passing across the curtain. Another voice, Mark's, this time. Dad, come on. Let's go home. We can fix this. We're family. Family. The word tasted like poison now. I forced my shaking hands to text, Caleb, they're here. Room 5. Hurry. The moment I hit send, a sudden bang echoed through the hall, a kick against the door. I stumbled backward, hitting the dresser. Open it, Dad, Mark shouted, voice no longer calm. We just need to talk. The next kick splintered the edge of the frame. I ran to the bathroom, searching for anything to barricade the door with. My eyes landed on the towel rack. It wasn't much, but fear lends strange strength. I ripped it free and wedged it under the handle. Dad, Sarah's voice rose now, shrill with frustration. You don't understand what you're doing. Oh, I understand, I muttered under my breath. The next sound was glass breaking the small window near the kitchenette. A hand reached through, fumbling for the lock. I grabbed the lamp and swung it hard against the hand. There was a scream, Mark's voice, and the arm recoiled instantly. My heart was a hammer inside my chest. "Don't make us do this," Sarah yelled. "We just need the files. Where's the bag?" Files. They knew Caleb had taken evidence. My phone buzzed again. "Caleb, police on the way. Stay inside. Don't open the door." Outside, I heard hurried footsteps, hushed voices, then silence. The car engine started again but didn't drive away. It idled, waiting. I crouched near the window, peering through the blinds just enough to see the edge of their car. A red sedan, with its headlights still off. Two silhouettes sat inside, unmoving, watching. Minutes passed, then 5 more. The air in the room felt like it could shatter. Finally, flashing blue lights swept through the parking lot. Sirens. The red sedan's headlights snapped on. The engine roared. They sped forward, tires shrieking across wet asphalt. Caleb's van appeared from the opposite side, blocking the exit. He jumped out, waving his arms toward the approaching police cruiser. "Don't let them leave," he shouted. The sedan swerved, narrowly missing the motel sign, before slamming into a curb. The door burst open. Sarah stumbled out, screaming, "It's not what you think." Mark followed, clutching his bleeding hand. Within seconds, officers surrounded them, guns raised, voices commanding them to get down. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth, watching from the window as the 2 people I once loved most were forced to the ground. Sarah's sobs filled the night air. Mark's voice was muffled by the pavement as they cuffed him. Caleb ran toward my door and knocked twice sharply. "It's over, Mr. Langford. They're in custody." When I opened the door, my knees nearly gave out. He caught me before I fell. "They found the chemicals in the car," Caleb said. "Your daughter had vials in her bag, same compounds from the vents. They were probably coming to destroy what was left. Or," he stopped himself, but I knew what he meant. "To finish it," I said quietly. He nodded. "But they won't be hurting anyone anymore." As the officers led them away, Sarah turned once, her face pale under the flashing lights. "Dad, please," she begged. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." For a moment, I saw her as the child she once was, the little girl who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers. But then I remembered the notebook, the recordings, the machine humming behind my furnace. I looked her straight in the eyes. "No, Sarah, it was exactly like this." The police drove off, the sirens fading into the distance. Caleb stayed beside me, steady as always. "You're safe now," he said. But I wasn't sure what safe meant anymore. I had survived something invisible, something that had crept into my lungs every night, disguised as the air I breathed. And worse, it had come from the people who once called me Dad. Outside, the motel sign flickered, buzzing faintly. Somewhere beyond the trees, a train horn wailed across the dark hills. I stood in the doorway, the cool Massachusetts air on my face, and realized the hardest part wasn't what they'd done. It was accepting that they had meant to do it. The following morning, the motel parking lot was quiet again. No flashing lights, no shouting, just the soft hiss of the early rain. But inside my head, the echoes of last night refused to fade. I kept hearing Sarah's voice through the door. "Dad, please, we just need to talk." Caleb drove me to the Pittsfield police station. Neither of us spoke much during the ride. The town rolled by in dull gray tones, the morning fog still clinging to the trees. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I didn't know if it was from fear or the chemical residue still fading from my body. At the station, the detective assigned to the case, Detective Marlon Reeves, met us in a small interview room. He was a tall man in his 50s, kind eyes but an expression that had seen too much of humanity's ugliness. "Mr. Langford," he began softly, "you're lucky that Plumber stepped in when he did. If that system had run another few weeks, we'd be looking at a very different outcome." I nodded, my throat dry. "Are they talking?" He leaned back, folding his hands. "Your son cracked first. Once he realized how much evidence we had, the photos, the recordings, the chemicals, he started talking fast." Caleb sat beside me, silent, his arms crossed. Detective Reeves continued. "Mark says it started as an idea Sarah brought to him last year. She claimed she'd developed a compound that could mimic natural aging, something that would make you sick gradually but not raise suspicion. He thought she was joking, but when his gambling debts got out of control, he came around to her plan. I felt my chest tighten. So she planned it, and he agreed? That's what he says. Sarah's version, of course, is different. She claims Mark pressured her into it, that she only helped design the system because she was afraid he'd hurt you if she didn't. Typical blame shift between co-conspirators. Caleb asked quietly, "What about the chemicals?" Reeves opened a file on the table and slid a photo toward us. It showed 3 small canisters, labeled in Sarah's handwriting: alpha compound, beta vapor, sedate mix. These, Reeves said, were her own formulations. The lab confirmed they contained traces of chloroform derivatives and neurotoxins enough to cause confusion, fatigue, and gradual organ failure when inhaled in low doses, perfect for mimicking natural decline. I felt a shiver run through me. My doctors told me I had early-stage heart issues. She must have seen the reports. She knew exactly how to hide behind them. The detective nodded grimly. She knew, and your son took care of the installation. He used his engineering skills to connect the dispersal unit to your ducts during the bathroom renovation. The timer was set to run at night every 3 hours. Small doses through your bedroom vents. I stared at the table, trying to imagine them building that thing under my roof. Sarah in her lab coat, carefully measuring. Mark checking airflow calculations. Both of them calm, focused, planning my death like it was a home project. Reeves's voice softened. They were taken to county jail last night. The DA is charging them with attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy, and use of chemical agents with intent to harm. What happens next? I asked. Pre-trial in 2 weeks, he said. It'll move fast. The evidence is overwhelming. But I need to warn you, Sarah's lawyers are preparing a defense built around mental instability and work-related stress. They'll try to paint her as a woman who broke under pressure. Broken? I said bitterly. She wasn't broken when she measured my doses. Reeves gave a slow nod. I don't think the jury will buy it either. He closed the file, stood, and extended his hand toward Caleb. You did a good thing, Mr. Donahue. You saved a man's life. Caleb shook his head. He saved his own. I just pointed the light. When we left the station, the sun had finally pushed through the clouds, pale and cold. The wet streets gleamed like silver. Caleb dropped me off at a small diner on Main Street so I could eat something. The waitress poured coffee without asking, and the smell nearly broke me. It reminded me of that first morning, the one when it all began with a drip on the ceiling and a lie on the phone. From the corner booth, I watched a young couple laughing by the window, their hands intertwined. For a moment, I saw Mark and Sarah there, small again, before life twisted them into something unrecognizable. When Caleb returned, he slid into the seat across from me. You did the right thing, he said quietly. I don't feel like it, I whispered. They'll spend decades behind bars, and I'm still the one who has to live with it. He reached across the table, his voice steady. Maybe, but at least you'll live. Outside, the clouds broke wider, sunlight spilling across the street. For the first time in months, I took a deep breath, clean, cold, and free of poison. And for a moment, I almost believed I could start over. 6 months later, I live by the ocean. After everything after the trial, the headlines, the endless questions from lawyers and reporters, I sold the house in Lenox. I couldn't walk through those rooms anymore. Every corner, every pipe, every quiet creak of the floor carried the memory of what nearly happened. So I found a small cottage in Rockport, Massachusetts, overlooking the Atlantic, where the air smells of salt and pine instead of copper and dust. The mornings here are gentle. The sea is gray-blue at dawn, the kind of color that looks soft even when it's cold. I sit on the porch with Max, old, but still loyal, and watch the fishing boats leave the harbor one by one. Their engines hum like distant lullabies. For the first time in years, I can breathe without fear. My health is slowly returning. The doctor said the toxins Sarah designed had settled deep in my lungs and liver, but the body has a way of forgiving what the heart cannot. I still wake up some nights gasping, still dream about the basement and the sound of that slow, steady drip, But each morning, I remind myself, I survived. The trial ended quickly. The evidence Caleb and the detectives collected was ironclad. The recordings, the chemicals, the notebook, all of it told a story too calculated to deny. Mark received 25 years in state prison. No parole for the first 15. Sarah was sentenced to 20 years, eligible for review after 12. I attended every hearing. They avoided my eyes. When the verdict was read, Sarah finally looked at me. For a moment, I saw the daughter I once knew, the one who used to sit beside me while I drew house plans, asking questions about every line. She mouthed one word. Why? I wanted to ask her the same. After the sentencing, I visited them once. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I wanted to see if any part of them still loved me. Mark sat in the visitation room, his orange uniform wrinkled, his face gaunt. He said nothing for a long time. Finally, he whispered, "You were supposed to die peacefully, Dad. No pain." "Peacefully?" I asked. "You mean quietly?" He didn't deny it. He just stared down at his hands. Sarah, when it was her turn, tried to smile. "I didn't want it to happen this way," she said softly. "You don't understand what it's like to lose everything, to be cornered." "Sarah," I said, "I was cornered too, by my own children." Her eyes filled with tears. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw remorse, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She talked about the pressure, the research scandal, the fear of disgrace. Not once did she say, "I'm sorry." I left the prison that day, knowing I'd buried them long before the law did. Caleb drove me home afterward. He didn't talk much. He didn't have to. That's one of the quiet mercies of genuine friendship presence without demand. He visits sometimes now, helping me fix things around the cottage. I told him once that if not for him, I'd be a name carved into a headstone in Lenox. He only smiled and said, "If not for you listening when I told you to leave." He's right. I survived because I chose to believe what didn't make sense. Because sometimes salvation arrives not in grand miracles, but in a stranger who notices a drip in the ceiling. A few weeks ago, I started drawing again. Not houses this time, but landscapes, the sea cliffs, the harbor, the wildflowers that grow between the rocks. My hands shake a bit, but the lines come easier each day. Maybe rebuilding doesn't always mean hammer and wood. Sometimes it's paper and memory. One evening, I found an old letter from Margaret, tucked inside a book I'd packed from Lenox. It was dated 2 years before she died. Her handwriting, neat and elegant, read, "If you ever find yourself alone, remember this love doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. Sometimes it hides in kindness from strangers, sometimes in second chances. You'll know it when it finds you." I read those words over and over, until the ink blurred through my tears. She'd been right all along. Love doesn't vanish, it adapts. Caleb and his wife invited me to dinner last Sunday. Their kids brought me seashells and called me Grandpa Ed. I laughed for the first time in what felt like years. It wasn't the family I'd built, but it was a family nonetheless. Last night, I stood outside as the sun sank into the Atlantic, painting the water gold. The breeze was cool, and for the first time since that awful day, I whispered aloud, "I forgive you." Not because they deserve it, but because I need peace. Hatred is just another poison, slow and invisible, and I've had enough of that for one lifetime. Now, when I close my eyes at night, I no longer hear the hiss of air vents or the hum of machines. I hear the ocean. Sometimes, when I dream, I see Margaret standing by the shore, smiling the way she used to. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. I understand her silence now. It's the peace that follows truth. This is what I've learned. Evil doesn't always come crashing through your door. Sometimes it knocks softly, saying your name in a familiar voice. And sometimes, the people who share your blood are the ones who drain it from you the slowest. But even then, life finds a way to remind you that goodness still exists in strangers, in second chances, in a world that keeps offering dawn after the darkest night. So each morning, I sit on my porch, coffee in hand, Max at my feet, and I watch the sun rise over the water. And when the first light touches the waves, I whisper, "Thank you." Because even after betrayal, after heartbreak, after nearly dying in my own home, I am still here, alive, free, and finally, at peace.